My name is Amelia Rose Townsend. I'm 34 years old. I live in Cleveland, Ohio, and tonight I'm on my way back to the house I grew up in. An old wood frame place on Maple Street where the paint peels in long, stubborn curls and the roof keeps snow like an old dog keeps a scent. For as long as I can remember, my life has been held together by small, quiet things. A slow steeping pot of coffee, the way my hands remember to fold shirts just so, the calendar of doctor appointments and bill due dates I keep on my phone like a fragile promise. Right now, my chest feels like a house where someone has left all the windows open in a winter storm. Cold, brittle, and raw. Before I dive in, if you're into real stories that hit deep, please consider subscribing. Sharing this isn't easy for me, but maybe someone out there needs to hear it. It's Christmas Eve and the highway is a gray ribbon that reflects the low clouds. The heater in my car stutters like it's thinking about giving up. I can smell the road, salt, diesel, and the faint plastic sweetness of the air freshener someone else put in months ago. I have a small duffel bag on the passenger seat with a sweater, a thrift store ceramic ornament my hands have washed 100 times, and a container of lasagna I made at 4 in the morning because it felt like currency I could trade for acceptance. I have nothing more expensive than that. I have nothing like the family people talk about when they post the perfect tree pictures. At the end of Maple Street is the house where my grandmother lives. Margaret Ellen Price, though everyone calls her Grandma Maggie. She is 81, stubborn as a crabapple, and so small you could lose her behind the couch cushions if she let you. Her house smells the way old hands smell. Lavender soap, mothballs in a cedar chest, the lingering perfume of holiday cinnamon that someone always lights as if scent can erase the past. The light in her windows is the kind that pulls you in, a warm rectangle in the cold dark. There is tension in me that isn't new. My brother Ethan is hosting tonight. Ethan is 30, tall where I am slight, an easy laugh that never quite reaches his eyes. He built a life that looks solid, an apartment downtown with mid-century furniture, a fiancé who's polished and witty, and a smile that wraps around people like a credit card. He says he loves the holidays. He says he loves family. But there's a thing like a seam that runs between us, a place where the fabric has been pulled apart and knotted back wrong. I haven't been home in 2 years. Not for birthdays, not for funerals, because walking into that kitchen always meant stepping on landmines of old accusations and half-truths. In my hand right now is a little wooden ornament I carved one night during a shift at the bakery when I couldn't sleep. A tiny pine with uneven branches. I plan to put it on Grandma's tree tonight. I know it will look small among the glass icicles and store-bought glitz, but I keep thinking, smallness is still something. The driveway crunches with someone else's footsteps when I pull up. The house throws back a glow. Inside, voices hum like a kettle. I can hear the muffled clink of glass, a clatter of a holiday playlist through the front door. I gather myself, smooth the sweater I'd folded in the car, and step onto the porch. The air hits my face, sharp and electric. My breath plumes. I find the door unlocked, as it always was, and push into the living room. Everything is too bright. The tree stands like a statement in the corner, a cascade of white lights and ornaments inherited and purchased. The table is heavy with dishes. Green beans in a dish with a cracked rim, mashed potatoes steaming like white clouds, a bowl of cranberry jelly that trembles like a smile. There are faces I know and some I don't. Ethan's fiancée, Claire, turns and smiles when she recognizes me, all teeth and practiced warmth. She reaches out with a hug that includes a small distance, as if she is noting how I measure up against a standard she keeps in her head. I am introduced. Names float around me. Amelia, someone says. Oh, you're Ethan's sister. The room hums politely. I set the lasagna down on the sideboard like an offering. Someone says, how thoughtful. And I realize my hands are trembling. My stomach is a tight fist. My chest wants to split open into words that won't come. Ethan sees me and his expression is a map of maps. Surprise, a thin line of irritation, then something I can't name. He moves through the room the way he always did when we were kids, with the easy confidence of someone who has decided he belongs. He notices the lasagna. He sees my bag. He sees my sweater. She brings nothing, he says, loud enough for half the room to turn. The sentence drops like a glass ornament hitting hardwood. Conversation pauses. Fork slows. Grandma's hand, mid-stir in a sauce, almost drops. For a second the house breathes in, then out, and everything goes brittle. I feel the words strike everywhere. In my hands, in my spine, in the hollow where a stomach used to be. My breath is a thin wire. I could feel the eyes of people, the cousins who always thought I was dramatic, Claire with her smile that never grows teeth, the neighbor who remembers me as a kid, pressing into me like cold fingers. She brings nothing. The syllables echo, ridiculous and true at once. It is not the first time someone has called me that. Nothing, 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 quick, clean and meant to erase. But that doesn't make it hurt any less. My throat closes. A memory slides up. A younger me, 15, washing dishes for $3 an hour while Ethan laughed with friends in the living room. Another memory. Me signing away financial aid letters I couldn't use because I had to stay home and work. Another. The night I buried my anger like wet linens and went back to making midnight bread for the landlord because rent was due. If this is resonating with you so far, a like really helps us reach more people. The room is quiet enough that I can hear Grandma Maggie's slow breath, the tick of the mantel clock, the remote click from somewhere. Ethan smiles a small, cruel smile and moves as if to close the sentence, but he can't know what I have in me or what I have already given away. He can't know the quiet deeds that don't get banquet checks or viral applause. He hasn't seen my nights when the world went dark and the only light I had was the small glow of an oven timer. She brings nothing, he repeats. Maybe because he thinks repetition makes a thing truer. Maybe because saying it loud makes it stick. I look at him. I look at the faces around me. The room has narrowed to the space between us. The lasagna smells like basil and resolve. The sweater on my shoulders feels suddenly like armor or something fragile pinned to a child's chest. And then, before I can figure out whether to run or to stay, Grandma clears her throat. Her voice is a thin, gravelly thing that carries in a house used to being hers. Ethan Price, she says, and there is a gravitas to it like the wind in old pines. There is something in her tone that is not just admonishment. It's the sound of someone who has decided a story must change. The room leans forward, waiting without knowing why. My body braces for what comes next. When Grandma Maggie spoke my name. No, when she said Ethan's name like that, the room sucked in like a mouth. She is small, but she can lean on an entire room with her voice. For a moment I see the girl I used to be. Knobby-kneed, hair scraped back with a school rubber band, standing in this exact spot with a paper crown too big for her head. Childhood has a way of making you believe in the invulnerability of places. The house was an anchor then. Tonight the anchor is a rusted one, but still an anchor. The truth about our family is stitched into the walls here. My father's cigarette burns, my mother's quiet laughter that came out in coughs. It is in the night Ethan learned how to slam a door so it sounded like a gunshot to swallow his hurt. It is in the hospital parking lot where I sat with cold coffee while other parents' cars warmed and my world felt smaller than a coin slot. Here is what I need you to know because the line "she brings nothing" isn't a joke. It was an accusation loaded with all the old chores of our life. Dad left when Ethan was 12 and I was 16. He left like a curtain drawing. No big scene, just vanished into the noise of a life that didn't leave him behind. Mom got sick the winter after. It was a slow thing like rust. We sold her piano. We gave away clothes. The landlord let us stay because Grandma made him feel sorry. She has always been good at that face that says I'm older than you and know more than you think. When my scholarship to a state college came through, it felt like air. I remember the envelope shaking in my hands like it might sprout wings. But a bill came the next day. Mom's chemo was more expensive than our bank account predicted. The mortgage bill became a mountain. Grandma's arthritis flared. The choice wasn't academic. It was survival. I wrote the check I couldn't afford and turned the scholarship down. I learned to cook because you could feed 5 people for the price of one takeout order. I learned to stitch because a tear on a skirt is something you can fix with a little patience. I learned to disappear because that was the trade-off. Ethan watched all of this with a filter that turned sacrifices into resentments. He learned that love could be transactional. If you gave too much, you were weak. If you held on to nothing for yourself, you were asking to be written off. He's better at money than I am in some ways. He can work a ledger so numbers look like language. But he also learned to spend in ways he could hide, to make small wagers that turned into big debts. I paid for one of his rehab intakes last summer with a check I shouldn't have written. No one knew about the fund of lunches and envelopes I kept hidden, the cash I slid across kitchen tables when I was supposed to be a distant sister. They didn't see me patch his shirts. They didn't see the nights I sat up with Grandma when the cough kept her awake. The thing about caretaking is that it makes you invisible. People only notice the explosion. They miss the slow, steady flame. It wore me down until I started to believe the story Ethan told about me. A woman who had nothing to put on the table. He spoke as if the lasagna in a foil tray could be translated into worth. He equated absence of wealth with absence of contribution, the way some people equate tidy homes with good parenting. He had learned to measure life in receipts. I know this intimately because I have kept receipts for things that don't fit in a bank book. The fact that I held my mother's hand when she shouted something that didn't make sense. The afternoons I spent coaxing Grandma back from a fall while Ethan texted from across town. The nights I went to work with a face that didn't show how many times I had been woken by bad dreams. Those things don't get checks and they don't get Instagram posts. And that somehow made them seem like nothing in Ethan's ledger. Grandma watches me. Her eyes are milky with age but sharply present. She moves slowly to the sideboard where my lasagna sits, picks up the foil pan with fingers that are small and knotted like old roots. The room waits like it is a held breath. I have this ridiculous, private hope that she will let it slide, that she will not make a thing of it, that she will take the pan and warm it and the night will continue. But the night has teeth in it tonight. Old grievances and fresh rust. Ethan, she says again, and there's a gentle sternness that is her hallmark. She doesn't shout. She rarely shouts. When she speaks, it's because she has decided words matter, and tonight she decides they must be weighed. You think she's nothing? She asks, and people shuffle, uncomfortable with directness like it is an open vein. Did you forget the summer Amelia skipped class to babysit you when you had the fever that frightened us? Did you forget the nights she worked double shifts to keep the heat on here, to keep us from sleeping in cold rooms? Have you forgotten how she... Her voice catches briefly, a thing like a fray. I feel as if someone has opened a valve. I watch faces around the room. Some soften, some look away. Claire's mouth tightens, like she is deciding whether to take Grandma's side or Ethan's. A cousin I haven't seen in years leans forward, suddenly interested as if a new plot twist makes the evening more than polite hors d'oeuvres and tidy smiles. If this is resonating with you, I say quietly, because I can't help the instinct that this moment is not only ours but maybe someone else's too. A like really helps us reach more people. It slips out of me awkwardly. A reflex, a piece of the other life I lead, small and make-believe. It draws a faint, surprised chuckle from someone. The ice shift. Grandma takes a breath that's longer than most and then begins to tell a story. Not the kind that makes everyone look good. Not the kind that smooths the evening with platitudes. She tells the kind that peels back paint. It begins with Dad leaving and how the electric bill was a winter the size of a sun. It continues with the scholarship, but she doesn't sugarcoat it. She says, simply and bluntly, that Amelia turned down the chance to leave because she chose us, because she saw a small family that might not survive without her. She brings everything we have left of what matters, Grandma says, her voice like a worn coin. She brought herself again and again to this house when it needed holding. There are murmurs, some sympathetic, some surprised. I sit very still because the world is shifting under my feet, and it has the particular nauseousness of truth being put under a light. Grandma reaches into her pocket, a small, slow motion that is the kind of action you learn when your joints have been traded for stories. She pulls out an envelope with a check inside, something she has kept hidden for years. A check Amelia had cashed once or twice in secret to pay for medicines or to get us through the week. She tells the room about it. How she swore she would never tell until tonight, because tonight the word nothing is being used like a weapon. There is a candle on the mantel and it seems to flame brighter. The air smells of cinnamon and something like truth, clean and sharp. The room is not the same as it was when I came in. People are looking at Ethan differently. He looks like someone who has been called on the carpet, and there's a fracture in him I have never allowed myself to study up close. Has something like this ever happened to you? I ask, quieter now, because even as Grandma speaks I see the cost of the revelation. Share in the comments. I'm reading everything. It is silly to ask, but I am human and my story now seems like an offering that might help someone else feel less alone. Ethan's mouth opens, closes. He looks away. The room holds. For the first time in years, the ledger is balancing in a way that favors a truth no one wanted to tally. But the night is not done. There are accounts to settle, words to say, and wounds that don't mend just because someone else points them out. The revelation is a pivot, not a cure. There is a flash of something in Ethan's eye that could be shame or something that has been honed into weapons for self-protection. He does not step forward. He sits down, and the quiet between us becomes a place where I can hear my own blood. The first sound after Grandma's confession is a fork clinking against a plate. Small and mundane and yet, in that beat, weighty. People begin to talk again in low murmurs, like a storm settling into rain. Faces change. Some soften toward me. Others dart with a tiny panic of someone discovering family isn't a postcard but a history with edges. Ethan sinks into his chair, jaw working. He looks older in a way that has nothing to do with lines and everything to do with exhaustion. I can see the years of pretending balanced on his shoulders, the false bravado like a coat too warm for the room. He had used the "she brings nothing" line like a shield. What I didn't expect, and maybe neither did he, was that Grandma would turn that shield into a mirror. He says, finally, quieter this time but no less sharp. You don't understand, Amelia. The honesty in it is bitter. You don't know what I've had to put up with. You get to be the martyr. You always did. I swallow, tart with the taste of iron. There is a memory of us in the backyard with a baseball mitt 2 sizes too big for my hand, Ethan throwing balls hard enough to bruise apples off trees. Once, we were safe in the way only children are safe. Then the world intruded and taught us how to measure ourselves against pain. Martyr. I repeat, because the word lands differently in my mouth. To him, it was accusation. To me, it has always felt like a label slapped on when people don't want to look at complexity. You think I wanted to give up my plans? You think I enjoyed being the one who stayed? I didn't say you enjoyed it, he snaps. His voice is breaking now, which makes it strange, like he's floundering for a footing he thought he had. But you never let anyone see you as anything but pure sacrifice. You made a virtue out of absence, Amelia. It made everyone. He gestures, vague, at the assembled family. Comfortable. It is a cutting thing, and I feel the cold of it in my shoulders. It's an accusation others have heard before, of choosing suffering like a badge, of letting pain define you. But something in me is not willing to be painted into martyrdom tonight. For too long I've been quiet because quiet kept us fed. Ethan, Grandma says, voice low now like the hush before snow falls. You use words the way other people use hammers. He stares at her, then at me, then he looks away. You didn't understand, he says again, softer, like speaking into a pillow. Dad left. He left everything and our lives were upside down. And you, he swallows. You left in the ways you thought you were supposed to. You made choices that made me less visible. You wouldn't let me take care of you. There is an ache in his admission, plain and raw. I want to tell him I never meant to erase him, that I thought I was holding him, but the sentence dies in my mouth. The room is sharp with old hurt. People shift uncomfortably. Children whisper. I remember the nights he came home drunk and violent with grief. I remember the first time he threw a plate. An accident, he said. But it shattered and we all pretended the shards were just unlucky. I remember covering for him at school when he slept through tests, when he used cigarettes like a talisman against worry. I remember paying for his first rehab intake, because even when he accused me of being absent, I couldn't leave him. That's a fact. One I kept not because I wanted credit but because it felt like the least human thing to let someone slip away when you could do something. So when Ethan talks about martyrdom, I want to shout. But my voice is sandpapered with years of silences. Grandma stands and moves like an old ship settling its cargo. She crosses to Ethan and touches his hand. Gentle, maternal, not condoning but not condemning either. I see a shift in him then, like a knot loosening. He looks at her and then at me. And in his eyes something opens that is not apology but an acknowledgement. Maybe, he says, choking out the word. Maybe I misjudged you. The phrase is small and waits to be recognized as an olive branch or a trap. He looks at me, really looks, as if seeing for the first time a tally that isn't numbers. Return addresses, soup cans, a furnace that didn't go cold because of late-night shifts. There is a complicated confession that follows, one that I hadn't expected. He admits, haltingly, that he used to resent the attention others paid me, that he felt erased by my choices. He confronts the night his debts grew and how he lied about where money went. He confesses to a string of half-truths and full mistakes, gambling losses hidden in medical bills, a credit card opened under a different name, an affair he kept because it made him feel alive in a way our past never had. The small, sharp shapes of his life make their own geometry in the room. I feel the world tilt. There is a relief that he is saying something and a sorrow that the something has cost so much. He looks battered by confession, by the idea that his words have weight and therefore consequence. He is not the villain in a film. He is a man with worn hands and tender regrets. Grandma's intervention is not a dramatic vindication. She doesn't hand me a trophy. She hands me the truth, a recounting of the silent work I'd done, the checks I'd slipped into a jar, the medicine I'd picked up when theirs couldn't. She reveals that the lasagna was not the thing. It was a symbol of ongoing care. Her voice is old, but it carries a clarity like bell metal. Ethan, she says finally, quiet but firm. We have been given a family, messy and broken. Do not make it smaller by trying to erase the hands that held it together when you couldn't. He leaves the room then, not in an angry slam but in a slow trajectory, as if he needs space to reframe himself. The door closes softly behind him. The room exhales. I don't feel triumphant. I feel emptied of the pressure to perform a certain kind of self. There is a strange, almost vertiginous peace in that release. I look at Grandma and in the lines around her mouth I see the lifetime of choices she made too. Hers were not all right, but they were hers. She had chosen to protect in her way. And tonight she'd used her voice like a balance beam. Someone reaches across the table and squeezes my hand. It is small, my cousin Tara, and it has the warmth of solid things. Claire approaches, her smile softer, as if she were recalibrating. I'm sorry, she says reluctantly at first, then more sincerely. I didn't know. Her apology is clumsy but true. Means something. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear how this ends. I murmur because there's a private humor in a story that is both small and huge, and because it's easier to breathe when you are reminded there are listeners who care. The words float out and land like a breadcrumb. The night moves on. Conversations thread through old stories and new admissions, laughter lurching like a boat finding a steady rhythm. But under everything there is a new current, one that requires work, apologies and boundaries. It's not fixed. There is no perfect reconciliation. There is, however, a table that holds more than plates and more than tidings. It holds the knowledge that to be nothing is a lie, and to be everything is an impossible demand. After Ethan leaves, the house rearranges itself around the absence. The hum of everyone's voices resumes but with a different timbre. Tentative, careful, as if we've all been made aware that language can sever as easily as it can heal. Grandma sits back down and reaches for the lasagna, tucking it into the oven with a practiced motion. The oven door snaps shut and the kitchen begins to smell like oven-baked tomatoes and hope folded into dough. I sit. My legs feel like they belong to someone else, numb and distant. The room is warmer because of the oven and because people's stories are, at least for now, more honest. Someone brings out a box of old photographs, and for a while the conversation turns to lighter things. A wedding from 20 years ago, a cat that survived 6 winters. Those moments of levity are salves. necessary and true. But the undercurrent of what was said lingers like the smell of roasted garlic after a pot is cleared. Grandma's revelation had been a fulcrum. It set a new axis for the night, and also for the months that may come. She had spoken truth to power not by accusing but by illuminating. In doing so, she had given Ethan the chance to see himself. He had not taken it fully, not yet. He left rather than stay to wrestle with the shape of his mistakes. Whether he comes back is a question that hangs like a string of lights, illuminating, fragile. Later, after guests have dwindled and the playlist turns to soft croons about silent nights, I slip outside. The air is sharp and the snow crunches under my boots. The house glows behind me, a small planet of warmth. My breath fogs in the air and I can taste the salt used on the walkway. I am aware of the smallness of my own body, the way my hands ache in the cold and my heart hums like a small engine. Grandma joins me on the steps, wrapping a thin blanket around her shoulders. She smells like lavender and the faint tang of medicinal things. Her hands are cold but steady. We sit for a while in silence and watch the neighbor's sodium lamp bloom across the street. She turns and catches my eye. "You did a good thing today," she says softly. "It's not gushing. It's not theatrical. It's simple and true. You could have stayed away. You came." "I almost didn't," I admit. My voice sounds different outside, less threaded with the expectations of indoors. I was so tired of being nothing. It hurt like a bruise. "I know," she says. She stares at the sky for a long moment. "You were young and you had to make choices. You made them the way you knew how. That matters." She takes my hand in both of hers, thickened by years, warm. "There's something else. I changed my will last month." Her words are small but the air around them seems to rearrange with the weight of them. "Not to punish anyone, Amelia. Put something aside for you. For times when you might need to step away and start over." Despite the late hour and the fragile quiet, the words move me so deeply I can feel the wetness behind my eyes. I'm not sure what to do with such a thing. Gratitude feels like a fragile thing when you've been taught that receiving can equate to being brave. "Grandma," I say, voice catching. "I don't want your money. I want..." My sentence stumbles because there's a complicated truth at the heart of it. I want to be allowed to be both self-sufficient and supported. I want to be permitted to choose myself without being accused of abandoning the rest. She squeezes my hand. "You can have both," she says. "Use it to build something. Don't feel ashamed." There is a decision in those words, a permission that feels like soft armor. The thing about being the one who always gives is that you rarely get permission to take. Tonight, in that bruised, starry moment on the porch, I take breath and let myself accept. When I go back inside, Ethan isn't there. The remaining guests mill around as if the night hadn't tilted. But it did. Just enough for the light to catch a new angle on old things. Claire approaches me later, more composed, and speaks with a softer tone. "I'd like to know more of the story," she says. "If you'd allow it." It is tentative. It is human. There is no dramatic reconciliation with Ethan that night. He will have to explain himself in time, to take accountability beyond a private apology. But something starts to unspool. Lines of communication, small openings. Perhaps he will come back to the table. Perhaps he will keep walking. The truth is hard and slippery. If something like this has ever happened to you, if you've been erased by a sibling or told you bring nothing, reach out. Share in the comments. It helps to know we're not alone. That night, Grandma gives me a small parcel in her bedroom, wrapped in paper that has seen many other hands. Inside is not a check but a letter. Her handwriting, shaky but legible. She writes that she remembers the smile on my face the day I was accepted to college, that she remembers the way I cooked for them and kept things warm. She writes that she is tired of secrets being used as weapons and that she wants the truth to be the heirloom she leaves behind. It is more than I expected. It is less than I feared it might be. Not an erasure of hurt, but a promise of safety. We talk until the clock pushes the hour of midnight back toward morning. We laugh at old bones of stories that seem less heavy in the dim. In the morning, there will be dishes to wash and a house to straighten. There will be the tucking away of grievances into new boxes labeled, "Work in Progress." The night was an incision that let light in. It did not heal all wounds, but it made them possible to treat. I feel in the center of my chest, a small pulsing thing that could be hope. It is not loud. It will not stave off all storms. It is, however, enough to move me. The day after Christmas is quiet in a way that Sundays are after storms, lovely with exhaustion and small, honest tasks that feel healing because they are mundane. I help Grandma make coffee, hands knowing the ritual, the measure of grounds, the time the percolator hums. We eat toast and talk about nothing and everything. Neighbors gossip, the way snow settles on the maple across the street, the small triumphs of keeping a plant alive in winter. Ethan doesn't come by. He sends a text later, short and awkward. "We should talk," it reads. I read it 3 times and choose to respond with a time and place. He needs to tell the truth in a place where the words can be held, not flung into the air like paper boats. I know the conversation will not fix the years with a ribbon on top. It might, however, be the beginning of him learning the weight of what he says. I spend the morning packing a small bag. I am not leaving forever. I am leaving with intention. I call a woman named Rosa. Her cafe downtown is warm and has forgiving hours. Room for one more shift. I ask, because returning to small, honest work is my way of stitching a life together that doesn't rely on being either a martyr or a martyrdom's opposite. Work steadies me. It is not everything, but it is a platform. Grandma watches me with a kind of steady affection that removes admiration from the equation and leaves the real thing. Care. "You do as you must," she says simply. And remember, worth is not counted in things brought to the table. The conversation with Ethan, when it happens, is messy and true. We sit in a coffee shop where the hum of espresso machines makes private things feel public in a protective way. He admits he has been feeling smaller for years, that he used anger as armor because being vulnerable felt like a risk he couldn't take. In the telling, he begins to understand how his words had been knives rather than tools. He apologizes. His apology is faltering and human. He does not ask for absolution. He does not expect it. He just asks to try. We do not hug and decide we are fixed. We talk about the nights I spent wiping counters at 2 in the morning, the ways I used my time and money to hold the house. I tell him I forgave him in parts long ago because otherwise the past would have hollowed me. He listens. He cries. He asks if we can start slowly. We tentatively set boundaries about what is acceptable and what is not. No public denigrations, no silence as a weapon, honesty about money and help. That doesn't mean every stitch will hold forever. Change doesn't guarantee absolution. But I leave that day with an ache that is softening into something like resolve. I feel the ability to set limits without cutting myself out of life. Grandma calls me that evening, her voice bright like new lights. "You know, Amelia," she says, "you brought more than lasagna." She lists things, small things she saw. The way I steadied her when she fell, the way I kept the bills from piling in a way that would have been unbearable, the small kindnesses I do for neighbors and friends. "You brought continuity," she says. "You brought love." It stings and soothes. People often think that worth is found in grand gestures or in the things you can display. But worth is not a buffet where you pick your contributions and count them like coins. Worth is the continuation of care, the string of small acts done without fanfare because someone believes in the shape of another life. If you've been through a night like mine, if you've been called nothing, or if you've been the one who judged someone else, there is a lesson in this tangled thread. The lesson is not tidy. It is not an invitation to martyrdom nor a condemnation of standing up for oneself. It is an insistence on nuance, that people can be both wrong and suffering, that abandonment can breed defensive cruelty, and that saying "she brings nothing" can be a symptom of a family that forgot how to translate care into recognition. The truth I hold now is this: bringing nothing and bringing everything are not opposites in the way we assume. You can bring a casserole and you can bring $5 bills and still be judged. You can bring your whole life and be called nothing because the people around you were not ready to see the currency you used: time, labor, patience. What matters is that someone finally named the truth and that someone else, Grandma, took the risk of making the ledger visible. The house on Maple Street will need work. The paint will peel again. Relationships will need tending like gardens. But I've learned to see my own labor not as invisible but as a lineage of choices I made because I loved. That does not make me innocent of mistakes. I am flawed. I misstep. But I also know the weight of what I carried. If this story has touched you, please consider subscribing and sharing. Maybe it will help someone feel recognized. And if you have your own story, share it in the comments. I'm reading everything now, not as a distant listener but as someone who has been painfully on both sides of the table. That Christmas Eve, when my brother said I brought nothing, Grandma spoke and rearranged how we all saw each other. She made room for confessions and for the slow work of repair. She reminded us that family is not a guaranteed comfort but a practice, one that takes attention, accountability, and the courage to tell the truth loud enough to be heard. And for the first time in a long while, I felt allowed to be in the room as myself, carrying my own small, honest things, lasagna, a wooden ornament, a scar or two, and the steady, imperfect light of what I have chosen to be.